When flying on an aircraft, your life is at the stake of the pilot's. Every actions the pilot take would judge whether you would arrive safely at your destination or if something would happen along the way. However, what happens if the pilots on board act rather unprofessional? Today we'll take a look at the case of LAPA Airlines Flight 3142. It is the year 1999, a year left before a whole new millennium of the year 2000. LAPA Airlines at this time was buzzing with flights, being the first ever airline in Argentinian history to compete with the National Airlines of Argentina, Aerolíneas Argentinas. Founded in 1977, the airline flew a variety of fleets involving the Boeing models of Boeing 737s, Boeing 757s, and Boeing 767s, a casual setup for airlines in the 1990s. The particular aircraft that would be flying as LAPA Airlines Flight 3142 would be Lima Victor Whiskey Romeo Zulu, a Boeing 737-200, specifically the 204C variant, that flew for LAPA Airlines for 2.5 years before the events of LAPA Airlines Flight 3142. The aircraft initially first flew in April of 1970 before being delivered to Britannia Airways. 20 years later, it would be given to French airlines TAT European Airways, otherwise known as TAT European Airways. The date is August 31st, 1999. It was a Tuesday evening in Buenos Aires, Argentina. In the Aeroparque Jorge Newbery Airport, Buenos Aires, LAPA Airlines Flight 3142 sits on the apron awaiting its flight. Today, LAPA Airlines Flight 3142 will be flying out of Buenos Aires heading northwest to the city of Cordoba in Argentina. On board the airplane, it was planned that there will be a total of 100 occupants in the Boeing 737 model. There will be 2 pilots flying the plane today. Captain Gustavo Weigel was in command, alongside First Officer Luis Echeverri. Captain Gustavo has logged in about 6,500 hours of flight time, while First Officer Louis has logged in about 5,000 hours of flight time. Upon boarding the aircraft for inspections, Captain Gustavo reportedly saw that the fuel on board was in the central tank. Disgruntled, he requested mechanics activate the valve to transport the fuel from the central tank towards each of the wing fuel tanks. Captain Gustavo, who was still disgruntled, reportedly threw his paperwork on the ground, showing his visible frustration. Captain Gustavo and First Officer Louis then enjoyed a nice conversation with the cabin crew once they returned back to the cockpit. As soon as the cabin crew left, however, a change of topics would enter the cockpit. Captain Gustavo had been suffering with family issues, indicating that he had a bad day. First Officer Louis would reply with sympathy, also claiming that his day was not as good either. As the cockpit crew continued to talk about their personal life, the checklist procedures for takeoff were simultaneously done. In the process of the checklist being done simultaneously, the pilots will get into a confusing situation, mixing up the checklist with personal topics. They managed to forget one crucial detail, however: the flaps. Flaps on board an aircraft helps generate lift alongside drag. You would normally see flaps on the area behind the wing, and it can be activated to different angles of the grease. When takeoff, lift is needed for the aircraft to act as a generator of lift, allowing the aircraft to take off. However, not a full amount of flaps was needed, only a couple of degrees down. In the case of LAPA Airlines Flight 3142, both crew, being tangled between checklist and conversation, crucially forgets to lower the flaps to 5 to 15 degrees. The flaps remain in the idle 0-degree positions throughout takeoff. It was reported that the crew were also smoking in the cockpit just before takeoff, which would ultimately distract the crew from the incoming danger. At 8:53 p.m., LAPA Airlines Flight 3142 began the takeoff roll. 100 souls on board, including the crew, were rolling fast down the runway of Aeroparque Jorge Newbery Airport near Buenos Aires. Suddenly, while in the process of takeoff, the takeoff configuration warning activates, indicating that something that was not configured has been noticed, which in this case was the flaps. The crew, however, chose to ignore this crucial warning. It may have been possible to avoid the takeoff and safely bring the passengers back. However, the crew quite literally ignored the loud blaring warning and continued accelerating to V1. After passing the VR speed, which is the rotation speed that the Boeing 737 can go through to be able to take off, Captain Gustavo attempts to rotate his aircraft to get airborne. However, as soon as he does that, the plane enters into a stall, falling straight back on the ground. The yoke entered into a stick shaker mode, which indicates that the plane is in a dangerous risk of stall, indicated by the yoke shaking dangerously and loudly. Ultimately, it was too late to recover, and the fast-speeding aircraft collides with the ILS antenna located at the end of the runway, followed up by the airport's perimeter fence. Between a park called Parque Carrasco and the airport, there is a road called Avenue Costanera Rafael Obligado, which was the traveling road for civilians to go to the Aeroparque Jorge Newbery Airport, Buenos Aires. LAPA Airlines Flight 3142 smashed through the avenue, crashing into 2 bus stops and 2 automobiles. The plane entered into an embankment just outside of Parque Carrasco, which happens to be a gas regulating plant. With the fuel spilling from the aircraft and the collision with gas, the plane immediately exploded upon impact, obliterating the fuselage and water slab of the Boeing 737. 60 passengers perished in the accident, followed up by 2 more ground fatalities. 31 were injured and some ground injuries too. 37 walked away alive. The Junta de Investigación de Accidentes de Aviación Civil, or simply known as GIAAC or GIAC, investigated the accident thoroughly and released the investigation report on the 18th of May 2000. 9 months after the accident. The cause of the crash, according to GIAC, was due to pilot error for the failure of extending the flaps to the proper degree and ignoring the warnings that were supposed to be informed of the fault. According to the Aviation Safety Network, the GIAC specifically explained the contributing factors, quote-unquote, lack of discipline of the crew that did not execute the logical reaction of aborting takeoff and verification of the failure when the alarm began to sound when adding engine power and continued sounding until the rotation attempt. Excessive conversation, foreign to the flight, and for moments of important emotional intensity between the pilots that were mixed with the execution of the checklist, arriving at omitting the part of these last ones where the extension of the flaps for takeoff had to be completed. Personal and/or family and/or economic and/or other problems of both pilots which affected their operational behavior. Insufficiency of the psychic control system, which did not allow to detect when pilots were suffering personal and/or family problems and/or of another type that influenced their operational capacity when diminishing the psychic stability. Knowledge and treatment of very personal and extra-occupational issues among the pilots and even with the onboard commissioner, who facilitated the atmosphere of scarce seriousness and concentration in the operational tasks. Background of negative flight characteristics of the commander that surfaced before his personal situation and relationship in the cockpit before and during emergency. Background of flight characteristics of the co-pilot which manifested themselves during the compliance with the procedural checklist in the cockpit where its components participated with a completely dispersed attention to the particular interest outside of the flight. No immediate recognition or verification of both pilots of the relationship between the type of intermittent audible alarm that indicated failure in the configuration for takeoff, with the absence of the flaps in the position for this maneuver. Design of the takeoff configuration alarm system that does not allow in this type of aircraft a simple check by the crew to ensure periodic listening to this type of intermittent alarm. In conclusion, unprofessional pilots can hugely impact aviation disasters. However, that does not mean that people should stop flying. Majority airlines around the world will serve the best quality for pilots, and there are many airplanes around the world that is the safest option for traveling. As for LAPA Airlines, the airline continued to fly in Argentina, even having a new livery before it ceased operations in April of 2003 due to bankruptcy. All the other aircraft that were leased returned to their initial owners. Anyways, thank you for watching today's video on LAPA Airlines Flight 3142 and support the channel by leaving a like and subscribing. Thank you and have a nice day.